Carrie and I have been married for 6 years now. In stories like this, people usually describe their wives as amazing, and honestly, I get it. After thinking about it a lot, I can say without hesitation, Carrie is beautiful, no doubt about it. She's something special. It's hard to explain, but she had this magnetic pull on me. We go way back. I've known her since we were teenagers. I'm a few years older, and back then, she was just a younger girl from down the street. But something happened when she was 14 that really changed things between us. It was right before I left for college. I just said goodbye to some buddies after a night at the pub. It wasn't too late, but it was already dark out. I decided to take a shortcut through the park, and that turned out to be the best decision I could have made. That's where I found Carrie, in a bad situation with two boys her age. Bad, might even be putting it lightly. If I hadn't shown up right then, I don't even want to think about what could have happened. Carrie always says I was her hero that night, that I saved her. The truth is, when I confronted those two punks, they panicked and bolted. But from that moment on, she saw me differently. For the rest of that summer, I noticed her around a lot more. Not exactly following me, but definitely making sure she was wherever I happened to be. My friends would tease me about it, saying I was too old for her. I was 18 at the time, but even then, I couldn't deny she was a stunning young girl. She already had those long, shapely legs and this presence about her. After that summer, I went off to university for 3 years and barely saw her. But when I came back home after graduation, before starting my new job, I spent a few months around town. By then, she was 18, and I was almost 22. That made things feel a little more legitimate, I guess. She'd grown into a gorgeous, confident woman, and it was clear her feelings for me hadn't faded. We started dating, walking through the park hand in hand, sneaking kisses and cuddles whenever we could. I wasn't a virgin anymore, but she still was. We had some close moments, sure, and I definitely explored her softness, but we didn't go all the way. I wasn't too bothered by it. Deep down, I still saw myself as her protector. And Carrie? She kept bringing up that night in the park like it was this life-changing moment. I think that whole summer sealed her love for me. And I have to admit, I was falling hard for her too, even if I didn't show it as much. Eventually, life pulled us in different directions. She headed off to Leeds Metropolitan University, and I started my first job in Bristol. We were miles apart. She promised to stay faithful, but I took that with a grain of salt. Having gone through college myself, I knew how things could go. I visited her a few times, but during the last trip, it was obvious she'd started building a new life, and we began to drift apart. That could have been the end of it. I didn't dwell on it. I moved on, spent a few years dating around in Bristol, and enjoyed that phase of my life. But fate had other plans. Eventually, I took a job that brought me back closer to home, and that's when Carrie came back into the picture. She had finished school and was working full-time. Her parents invited me over, and I'll admit, her initial reaction to seeing me wasn't quite the warm welcome I'd hoped for. But that changed fast. She had grown even more mature, more worldly. She had lost her virginity by then, but not to me, and honestly, that didn't bother me. I had no right to hold that against her. One evening, she told someone she still saw me as her hero. It felt like we were picking up right where we left off. This time, we didn't stop at just kisses. We became lovers. And with every moment we shared, our bond deepened. Marriage felt like the natural next step, like the sun rising in the morning. 6 years into our marriage, I still felt just as in love with her. Carrie could be a bit traditional and didn't always agree with everything I did, but she never forced her opinions, so it was never a problem. We were truly happy, and the future looked bright. Then came the promotion. My company offered me a step up, a great opportunity, but it came with a catch: we'd have to move to Leeds. That's where Carrie had gone to university. The other option was a post in the Middle East, but since we were thinking about starting a family, Leeds made way more sense. At first, everything seemed fine. The move went smoothly, and we were settling into a rented flat. One thing I knew I'd miss was watching Arsenal play. Leeds United wasn't about to win me over, not with legends like Billy Bremner and his crew long retired. Still, Leeds didn't seem like a bad place overall. For those who don't know, it's a lively city with a solid nightlife scene. One night, Carrie suggested we explore the city together, check out some of the old spots she used to hang out at during her university days. We grabbed drinks at a few student pubs, but even she felt a little out of place. It had been 8 years since she graduated from Leeds Met, and it showed. We had dinner at a restaurant where she used to work, but the staff had all changed, and the decor was totally different. You could see the disappointment on her face. It just didn't have that nostalgic charm she'd been hoping for. It's weird how places can change so much over time, and how that change can make you feel kind of empty. The night seemed like it was heading nowhere fast. Then Carrie mentioned a little pub on the edge of town, a place she'd worked during her final year. It wasn't a student bar, so she figured maybe some of the locals would still be around. It was still early evening, so we decided to walk hand in hand through the city center like a couple of lovebirds. We left the car parked and wandered deeper into the city. Eventually, Carrie led me down a couple of back alleys. The bright city lights gave way to shabby houses and old, run-down workshops. I started to get a bit uneasy and asked if the place had always been like this. She laughed and said yeah, it hadn't changed. She pointed out a corner and mentioned that she'd lived nearby back then in a cheap flat with 3 other girls, one of whom also worked at the same pub. Her eyes lit up as we got closer, and I couldn't help but smile too. She seemed genuinely happy. Right in front of us stood a worn-down pub that I wouldn't have stepped into on my own, but with Carrie it felt different. Not that she was dressed to turn heads or anything. That wasn't her style. Carrie was always elegant, dark hair perfectly styled, smart outfits, heels that meant business. But that night she wore something a little bolder, a short skirt that showed off her legs. I teased her, asking if she was channeling her student days. At the time, I thought maybe she just felt like reliving old memories. Now, looking back, maybe part of her knew what was coming that night. Or maybe not. If she did, I doubt she would have walked out of our flat at all. The place was called the Rose and Crown, with 2 big, old stained glass windows at the front, clearly once impressive, though time hadn't been kind to them. I hesitated and asked if she was sure this was the place. She smiled that beautiful smile I'd loved since she was a teenager, and said it wasn't as bad inside as it looked. That smile. I had no idea it would never feel the same again. I followed her in, and she was right. The inside was old-fashioned, but surprisingly clean. There was a long, dark wooden bar with an antique mirror hanging behind it. Those grubby windows from outside looked perfectly fine from the inside, glowing softly from the street lamps. Carrie looked around like she was seeing an old friend again. "Hasn't changed a bit," she said, practically enchanted. I joked that it probably hadn't changed in 50 years, and she giggled, giving me a warm, affectionate look. Then she pointed toward the far end of the bar, let go of my hand, and made her way across the wooden floor. She leaned in and said to the bartender, "Hey there, remember me?" The guy turned, studied her for a second, and then lit up. "Carrie? Is that really you?" he said with a grin. She nodded, grinning right back at him. He was tall and skinny, probably around our age, but I never did catch his name. I smiled, happy that someone had recognized her. Maybe the night wasn't going to be a total bust after all. Then he stepped out from behind the bar, walked right up to her, and pulled her into a big hug, followed by a full-on kiss on the lips. It didn't last long enough for me to feel straight-up jealous, but it sent a cold jolt through me. The smile slipped from my face. They launched into a conversation, catching up about people and places I didn't know. I waited, figuring she'd introduce me at some point, but it never happened. Just then, another guy walked into the pub. The bartender called out to him, telling him to come see who'd shown up. The guy walked past me like I didn't even exist, then lit up when he saw Carrie. "Carrie!" he shouted, and before I knew it, she was in another man's arms, getting kissed again, this time by a stranger I'd never seen before. Still no introduction. Then the second guy said, "Carl will be here any minute." And Carrie blushed. Actually blushed. He smirked and said he figured that would get a reaction out of her. Carrie smiled, almost sheepishly. "Really? Carl still comes here?" "Yep," he said. "He'll be here soon." I stood there, confused. Who the hell was Carl? She never mentioned a Carl. Not once. And sure, that could have been innocent, but it didn't feel that way. I didn't like the direction the night was heading, not one bit. And being ignored like I wasn't even there? That's dumb. I stood there awkwardly, just out of place. I cleared my throat, hoping she'd notice me. Nothing. Then I coughed, loudly. The bartender glanced over, but Carrie didn't even flinch. She was fully locked into conversation with that guy. The bartender gave a half-hearted apology, saying he'd be with me in a minute. I wasn't sure what to do. I could have stepped in, maybe grabbed her arm, but she was so wrapped up in reminiscing with her old pals that I just waited. I walked up to the bar and leaned against it, standing right behind her. Finally, the bartender turned to me. "Yeah, mate, what'll it be?" I asked for a pint of whatever was best, and added, "And whatever the lady wants." His friendly tone vanished the second I spoke. He looked at me like I was a complete stranger and snapped, "I don't think this young lady accepts drinks from just anyone." My temper flared. "I think she'd have a drink with me," I said, my voice sharpening. He started in with, "Now look here, buddy, you can't just come in here and—" That's when Carrie finally turned around. The raised voices must have finally pulled her attention away. She stepped in casually, waved it off like it was no big deal, and told the guys I was with her. No warm glance. No acknowledgement. Just a quick brush off. The bartender shut up but still gave me a dirty look as he poured my beer. "That's £2.20, he muttered, sliding the glass across the counter. I asked again about Carrie's drink, and he just said, "It's on the house." Then he turned to her, took her order, and poured it, without even looking my way. I stood there nursing my pint, trying to make sense of what was going on. My own wife was surrounded by these guys, laughing, joking, catching up on the past like I wasn't even standing there. She was completely engrossed, and I was growing more frustrated by the second. Carl's name kept coming up. And every time it did, I saw this little knowing smile cross the face of the man next to her. Like it meant something. Like it was more than just talk. I was about to step between them, to get Carrie's attention, remind her I was still there, when the pub door swung open and two big guys walked in. One was white, the other black, and both of them looked like they didn't mess around. The bartender lit up. "Carl! Speak of the devil!" So this was him. The infamous Carl. He was tall, solid, and had that tough guy presence you feel before you even look up. The guy froze when he saw Carrie, and then this massive grin spread across his face. "Surprise, Carrie! Look who showed up!" He didn't wait for a reply. He brushed past me like I was furniture, and the crowd parted like he owned the place. Then he threw his arms around her, and she hugged him back, with enthusiasm. They kissed. Not just a polite peck. This one lingered. Way too long. Everyone around them stood there smiling like they were watching some touching reunion. Except me. I wasn't smiling. I was stunned. And then his hand, his damn hand, slid down her back and cupped her ass. That was it. I stepped forward, ready to put a stop to it. If Carrie was going to let this happen, if she couldn't even bother introducing me to these people, then we were leaving. But I didn't get far. Just one step, and I felt a heavy hand clamp down on my shoulder, gripping hard. "Wouldn't do that if I were you, buddy," a deep voice rumbled behind me. It was one of Carl's friends, blocking me, stepping in before I could even get close. I shook my shoulder, trying to break free. "Get your hand off me!" I snapped. Didn't work. The other guys, all four of them, turned to face me. They squared up like they were ready to rumble. My blood was boiling, but then I heard Carrie's voice, calm and casual like none of this was strange. Leave him alone, she said, not even looking at me. He's with me. He brought me here. He's fine. He won't cause trouble. She finally turned her head toward me, but she didn't meet my eyes. The big guy let go of my shoulder, but not before giving me a quiet warning. Stay cool. His tone left no room for debate. Then he physically guided me away from them, putting his broad frame between me and the group. I couldn't believe it. Just 20 minutes earlier, I'd been walking hand in hand with my wife through downtown Leeds, completely in love. Now I was being treated like a tag-along stranger, pushed aside while she cozied up to someone else. She moved toward a table with Carl and the others while I hung back, trying to make sense of it all. I watched as a handful of women, dressed provocatively, wandered over to Carl or his buddy, brief conversations, flirty smiles, and then they'd either leave or perch themselves at the bar. I wasn't clueless. I knew what I was looking at. These women weren't friends. They were working. And Carl? He wasn't just some charming old acquaintance. He was a pimp. My wife, my respectable, conservative, Carrie, was socializing like this was totally normal. Could she seriously not see what kind of place this was? What kind of man Carl clearly was? No matter what was going on here, one thing was obvious. We needed to get the hell out of that pub. I raised my voice just enough so she couldn't pretend not to hear me. Carrie, I called out. It's time to go. She glanced over at me, and just like that, the smile she'd been wearing disappeared. Her face shifted, troubled, uncertain. But she didn't say anything. No. Wait. She just shook her head slowly, and turned back to the group. Her smile returned, and not long after, she was giggling like a schoolgirl again, like I wasn't even standing 10 feet away. Then I felt the same heavy presence at my side again. The deep voice rumbled low in my ear. Play it cool, or get the hell out. I'm not warning you again. I tried to argue, but he wasn't having it. His massive hand pressed against my chest and shoved me back, away from the table, back toward the bar. He told me straight up that the lady didn't seem too interested in me and said I could either wait for her there, or go home. Hell, he even suggested I find someone else for the night, maybe one of their girls. Before I could react, he waved a woman over. She was tall, dressed to turn heads, and she came right up beside me like we were on a date. This is Sally, he said. She'll take care of you tonight. It'll cost you, but she's worth it. Might help you forget about your little lady over there. He gave me a fake apology about the night not going how I expected and said, That's life. Then he backed off, disappearing into the crowd and returning to the table like nothing happened. I just stood there, furious, speechless. Sally leaned in a little and said softly, Don't push your luck. You don't want to mess with those two. Seriously. She tilted her head toward Carl and added, Why don't you let it go? Find someone else for the night. I mean, I'm not too bad to look at, am I? I turned and looked at her with complete disbelief. Through clenched teeth, I said, That woman over there isn't my girlfriend. She's my wife. Sally blinked like the words had physically hit her. Oh, she said, suddenly realizing just how bad the situation really was. Wow. That's not good. I tried to head toward the table, but she stepped in front of me. Hold on, she said. Trust me, you don't want to go over there right now. I asked her. Then what the hell am I supposed to do? She thought for a second and then offered. I could talk to her for you. You sure she's your wife? The look on my face must have been answer enough. Okay, she said, raising her hand like a crossing guard. Just stay here. Don't follow me. I watched her weave her way through the crowd, then leaned down to whisper something in Carrie's ear. Carrie looked up at me for the first time all night. There was something like surprise in her expression, like she just remembered I even existed. She turned away quickly, almost guilty, and whispered something back to Sally. When Sally returned, she told me. She said she'll come talk to you in a bit. I didn't hold back. No. I want her here now. Sally raised her eyebrows. Don't push your luck, mister, she said quietly, then walked off down the bar to chat up another customer. I stood there fuming, watching as Carl draped an arm around Carrie's shoulders, his hand casually brushing over her chest. She threw a few weak, watery smiles my way, but I wasn't smiling. I was counting the minutes, trying to figure out when exactly I'd stopped mattering. 5 minutes passed before she finally stood up and excused herself. But she didn't come to me, not right away. She went to the restroom first, disappearing through the door. I didn't know if I should follow or wait. Before I could decide, she came back out and, finally, walked over to where I was standing. I didn't hold back. "What the hell are you doing, Carrie?" I snapped. "What is this? We need to go, now." When I reached for her arm, she pulled away from me and took a step back. "Don't cause a scene," she said flatly. "If you want to leave, go." "I'm staying." I was stunned. "You're staying?" I asked, barely able to believe it. "I'm just here to catch up with old friends," she replied, her voice as cool as ever. "You can wait for me, or go home. Come back later if you want. We'll talk then." I just stared at her, speechless. She looked me straight in the eye and said, "Terry, it's probably better if you just go home. I'll get a cab back later. We'll talk, okay?" "I'm not leaving you here," I said, my voice breaking. She sighed, almost like she pitied me. "Then stay and watch, Terry. If you must. But you might not like what you see. Just don't interfere." I tried again to reason with her, to pull her away, but she wouldn't budge. Instead, she said, "It's better this way. Just go. I'll see you later. Don't worry, sweetheart, it'll all be okay after." But I didn't believe that. Not anymore. "I love you, Terry. I'll make it up to you, I promise," she said, her voice soft, like it was supposed to fix everything. "Just give me tonight. Everything will go back to how it was." Then she tried to walk away. I grabbed her arm, not hard but firm, just shocked by how surreal this whole thing had become. And before I could say anything else, I was slammed back against the bar. That big guy, the one who'd warned me earlier, knocked my hand off her like I was some random creep, not her husband. I swung at him out of sheer instinct, but it didn't matter. The punch landed like a mosquito bite. He shoved me again, this time even harder, and I hit the ground. I heard him say something about how he'd already warned me, that smug grin still plastered across his face. Then, like I weighed nothing, he grabbed me and practically threw me toward the door. I heard someone yell, sounded like Carrie, begging him not to hurt me, saying I hadn't really done anything. I don't know if it mattered, if it even made a difference. But at least she tried. Next thing I knew, I was outside. And then came the punch to the stomach. All the air left my lungs. Before I could catch a breath, the second hit crashed into my chest like a freight train. I crumpled onto my back and just laid there stunned, waiting for more. But it didn't come. I stayed on the ground, trying to breathe. My chest was on fire, and my gut felt like it had been caved in. 2 punches, just 2, and I was wrecked. Couldn't move. Could barely think. I lay there for what felt like forever, wondering how in the hell my night had ended like this. Eventually, maybe 10 minutes later, I got myself off the pavement, brushed the dirt off my shirt, and stood up. I looked down at my clothes, at my hands, at the street. All I could think was, how the hell did we get here? The night had started so perfect. A walk through the city, hand in hand with my wife, and now this. I've never felt more humiliated in my life. I didn't know a soul in Leeds. I had no one to call, nowhere to go. Just stood there, leaning against the cold wall, watching a steady stream of guys walk into that place. Most of them came out later with one of the girls on their arm. The place was a damn brothel. My wife, my Carrie, was in a brothel. And I knew she knew. I bit back the tears, shoved down the pain, and forced myself to think. I couldn't just leave her there. No matter what she was doing, no matter how messed up this had all gotten. I couldn't just walk away. Not yet. If she didn't come home with me, then maybe, maybe everything we had really was over. An hour passed before I could even gather myself enough to go back inside. I didn't know what I'd find. But I sure as hell didn't expect what I saw. It was Carrie, my wife, up on a makeshift stage, or maybe just a cleared-out space in the middle of the pub, with another girl. She was down to her last piece of clothing. A group of guys surrounded them, laughing, cheering. I stood frozen as the final scrap of fabric started to come off. Something in me snapped. I plowed through the crowd, shoving guys out of the way. I reached for Carrie, trying to grab her, to pull her out of that madness. She turned and saw me. Her face twisted in shock. "Oh no, Terry, oh for Christ's sake, no." And then I felt it. A fist, hard and fast, smashed into my face. Everything spun. Lights dimmed. I crumpled again. The last thing I remember seeing was Carl, arms wrapped around Carrie, like he was protecting her from me. She looked horrified, like she was watching a car crash she couldn't stop. They didn't go easy on me the second time. When I finally came to, I was lying in the middle of some dark car park, far from the pub. Everything hurt. But nothing felt broken. I guess they were experts, beat me just enough to send a message. It took me another hour to stumble my way back to our car. And another hour just to get it started and make it back to our rented flat. I collapsed on the sofa, too broken to care when, or if, Carrie would come home. The next morning, I felt like death. Took the longest, hottest shower of my life. Slowly, my body started to feel like mine again. But my mind, my heart? Still a mess. Was our marriage over? I didn't know. I couldn't understand any of it. This woman, Carrie, my wife. The one I'd known for years. The one I loved. How could she have done this? By 11 a.m., she still hadn't come back. I wasn't going to call. The phone line had only been set up the day before. Only 2 people had the number, me and her. When it rang, I picked it up. Her voice was quiet on the other end. "Hey, are you okay?" I didn't answer right away. I didn't even know how to. "You seriously think I'm okay?" I finally asked. She sighed. "Terry, I'm sorry. I am. I really am. I know last night was. I shouldn't have gone back there. It was a mistake." Then she asked where I'd gone. Where I'd ended up. I ignored her question about how I was and instead demanded, "Where the hell are you?" She started to answer. "Don't be stupid, Terry. The only one who..." But then stopped herself mid-sentence, realizing what she was about to say. Silence followed. Neither of us spoke for what felt like forever, but I could hear her crying quietly on the other end of the line. Through sobs, she started pleading, begging me to try and understand. She said she wanted to come home. She wanted to fix things, to go back to how it used to be. She promised she'd explain everything if I gave her the chance. God, a part of me wanted to tell her to stay the hell away. But this couldn't be left hanging. It had to be resolved one way or another. "Fine," I said, voice cold. "Make your own way home. Or better yet, get one of your boyfriends to give you a ride." "Oh, thank you, Terry," she whimpered. "I'll be there in half an hour. An hour tops. It's going to be okay. You'll see. Everything's going to be okay." I slammed the phone down before she could say another word. Damn it. God damn it. I loved her, but I hated her too. What was I going to say to her when she got back? Would I tell her to pack her bags? Or would I fall into that familiar trap, take her in my arms like none of it had happened? As it turned out, I didn't have to choose. Half an hour passed. Then an hour. Then the whole afternoon slipped by and turned into evening. No sign of her. Nothing. By 8 p.m., it hit me, she wasn't coming back. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. And with every hour that ticked by, my emotions twisted into something colder. Not rage. Not yelling, smashing things kind of anger. No, this was quiet, simmering fury. It calcified inside me. Cold. Sharp. Unforgiving. I packed a few things in the car and drove slowly back into the city, determined to find that pub again. The one Carrie had taken me to. I got turned around a few times, but eventually I spotted the same old factory nearby, and just down the street, there it was, the Rose and Crown. I parked around the corner, stepped out, and walked toward it. Outside I looked calm. Inside, my heart was pounding. Truth was, I was scared. Not just emotionally, I was physically afraid. After what they'd done to me the night before, I had every reason to be. But I had to know. I had to see. I paused at the door, took a breath, and pushed it open. The place looked just like it had the night before, grimy, crowded, rough. I recognized some faces. A couple people did double takes, like they couldn't believe I was stupid enough to come back. If they hadn't been sure it was me, the bruises and black eye probably confirmed it. Then the bartender spotted me. Back again? Haven't you had enough, mate? He asked, more surprised than hostile. I walked up to the bar and said flatly, "Where's my wife?" He blinked, confused. "Your wife?" I nodded. He leaned back slightly, brows furrowing. "Bloody hell, she told us you were just some date." He stood there, trying to piece it all together. I saw the recognition dawn on him, realization about what had gone down the night before. Maybe what happened after I'd been tossed out too. I could tell he was bracing for trouble. He tilted his head toward a corner of the bar. I followed his gaze. There she was. Carrie. Sitting on Carl's lap. Neither of them had noticed me yet. I walked right up to them before they even turned their heads. When Carrie saw me, her whole face froze. She scrambled to adjust her blouse, like it mattered at that point. It didn't. Everyone in there had already seen more than enough. Carl just grinned, that kind of smug, I wouldn't grin you want to wipe off someone's face. "Well," I said to Carrie, "that half hour turned into something else, didn't it?" She said nothing at first, her eyes wide, her mouth slightly open. Then Carl chimed in, looking me dead in the eye. "You can leave now. I'll send her home when I'm good and ready." Carrie finally spoke, voice low and shaky. "Please, Terry. I'll be back home later. I promise." Carl laughed, kissed her like I wasn't even there, then added, "She goes when I say she can go." He stared me down, trying to provoke something. Waiting for me to explode. I turned to Carrie, ignoring his smirk, and said, "This is it, Carrie. Right here. Right now. You decide. Come with me, or stay with him. There's no in between. And here's the honest truth, despite everything, despite the humiliation, the betrayal, the pain, I was still ready to try. If she'd chosen me in that moment, if she'd gotten up, walked away from Carl, and said she wanted to make things right, maybe, just maybe, I could have tried to salvage it. But that moment, it was everything. I wasn't totally sure, but there was a moment, just a flicker, where it looked like she might choose me. Carrie looked at me with this pitiful expression, her lovely brown eyes filled with hesitation. She knew exactly how much she'd hurt me. I could see it all there, plain as day. But instead of doing the right thing, standing up, coming back to me, she was calculating. I could see it. How far could she push me? How much more could she get away with and still expect me to be standing there, waiting? She eventually whispered, asking me to be reasonable. And that's when I knew, this was it. She'd failed me again. That was the end of us. Still, she kept talking, saying how much she missed her old friends, how she just wanted one last night to relive those student days. She asked me to hang on just a little longer, to let her have this last little fling. Promised me, again, that everything would be normal afterward. That she loved me. That she'd make it up to me. She looked at me like she meant it, eyes pleading for me to agree. But I said nothing. She started to speak again, but Carl had clearly had enough. He yanked her close and kissed her, hard. She melted into him, her words swallowed up by the act. That was all I needed to see. All the information I could possibly need. So, my wife was coming back home, eventually. Maybe tomorrow. Or the day after. or whenever Carl decided he was done with her. Wasn't that just perfect? Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the West Indian guy moving toward me again. I lifted my hands and backed away. No way was I going to tangle with him a second time. The pub had gone dead silent, everyone watching, waiting to see what I'd do. But there wasn't going to be a scene. Not this time. "See you all later, then," I muttered, my voice hollow. "I'm not a little girl anymore, Terry!" Carrie suddenly shouted after me. "I can look after myself now." Even her own face dropped when she saw the way that hit me. That had been our thing, our story. I'd been her protector. Her hero. The one she always said saved her, the one who'd always stood by her. And now she was throwing it in my face like it was a joke. "I'm sorry, Terry," she started again. "I didn't mean that. I just..." But I didn't let her finish. I didn't even look back. I walked out the door without a word, her apology breaking into nothing behind me. As I stepped outside, I heard Carl laugh, loud and full of mockery, and through the open door, I watched him slide her blouse off like she was nothing. His hand disappeared under her skirt, all while I stood there, forced to watch. Maybe that's why the tears rolled down her cheeks. Maybe. Maybe a part of her still loved me, her own twisted version of it, at least, and seeing me humiliated like that again was too much. That's what I choose to believe, anyway. I shut the door behind me. Inside, the pub exploded with laughter and chatter, like they'd been holding their breath waiting for the drama to end. Maybe they thought they'd seen the last of me. I walked slowly back to the car, trying to keep it together. Anyone watching probably thought I was calm, collected. But I was far from calm. I was shaking. I opened the trunk and pulled out what I'd packed earlier. No one knew what I was doing, but my mind was racing, terrified about what I'd decided. I'd never done anything like this in my life. But I had a license for it, my Browning over an under 12 gauge. I'd been clay pigeon shooting for a few years. Wasn't great at it, but I didn't need to be for what I had in mind. I loaded a handful of cartridges into my jacket pocket, choosing the smallest caliber I had. I wasn't trying to end up in prison for murder. I broke the barrel, slid in 2 shells, and closed it with a click. Then I walked back toward the pub. The 2 big stained glass windows glowed in the streetlight, dull and faded now. I stood across the road, heart pounding in my chest like a jackhammer. This isn't me, I thought. This isn't who I am. But what choice did I have? There was no point in going back in there and arguing with her again. She wouldn't listen. And I wasn't about to take another beating for nothing. I couldn't go home and wait like some sad sack while she played house with a pimp. No. It had gone too far for that. I lifted the shotgun, shaky as hell, the barrel trembling as I fought to steady it. I was only maybe 12 or 15 feet from the windows. Close enough. I tightened my grip. Resisted the urge to close my eyes. Then I pulled the trigger. The blast shattered the first window in an instant, spraying glass into the street. A second later, I fired again, and the other window exploded just the same. The sound of the shots echoed through the street, bouncing off the buildings. Way louder than anything I'd ever heard at the clay range. And then came the sound of glass, hundreds of tiny shards hitting the ground like crystal rain. I calmly pulled 2 more shells from my pocket and loaded them into the shotgun. Then I waited. I didn't know what they'd do, and honestly, I kind of hoped they wouldn't come out. But I was ready. Ready to show them I wasn't the kind of guy who'd just lie down and take it. The pub doors burst open, and a few guys came spilling out. They all stopped cold when they saw me standing there, shotgun in hand. No one moved. Then Carl came barreling out, right behind him that massive goon of his. "You stupid effing psycho!" Carl screamed, charging straight at me. Maybe he thought I hadn't reloaded. Or maybe he wasn't thinking at all. I leveled the gun. Took aim around his knees. I didn't want to kill the bastard, just make damn sure he remembered me. I was steady. Cold. My arms didn't shake anymore, and the barrel lined up perfectly. It felt like time slowed down. I saw his face change, the rage draining out, pure fear taking over as it finally hit him what a mistake he'd made. Maybe I had the same grin he wore the night before, the one where you know you've won. Bang! He went down, screaming, his legs a bloodied mess. Even I was surprised how bad it looked. Fair play to the guy, though. He kept coming. Stupid or brave, I don't know. But he didn't stop. Not until the second shot tore into him. Carl hit the ground, howling. His sidekick, Ted, was groaning beside him, not moving much. I didn't even bother reloading. I was too drained, too numb. But the rest of the crowd? They disappeared. Melted away like smoke. It went quiet, well, as quiet as it could be with two guys screaming in pain on the pavement. I turned and walked back to the car, legs shaking so badly I thought they'd give out. I popped the trunk, tucked the shotgun back inside, and drove home. Slow. Careful. I thought about going back into the pub, maybe scaring some sense into Carrie. But I couldn't. I didn't trust myself. And truth be told, what I'd just done, it terrified me. Still, I'd done it. Just like I told myself I would. And somehow, that was enough. Strangely, I slept okay that night. Woke up feeling almost fresh. Black eye, busted lip, bruises all over, but my mind was clearer than it had been in days. I figured someone would show up that morning, either Carrie or the cops. Turns out, it was either. Around 10 a.m., the phone rang. A voice on the other end asked, "Is this the husband of Carrie Bellings?" "Yeah, that's me," I replied, tense. I braced myself, expecting them to say I was under arrest. But no. The voice continued, "We've got her at the station. She's under arrest. Could you come and collect her?" I was stunned. Arrested? For what? The answer hit like a slap. She was picked up with a group of prostitutes last night. After a shooting at a pub on the edge of town. That was it. Everything suddenly made sense. Her late nights, the distance, the secret life. It all clicked. The officer's voice softened. "Sorry you had to find out this way. Happens more than you'd think." Apparently, they hadn't initially pegged her as one of them. Thought she was more upper class, maybe even a witness. But when I refused to come and get her, they lumped her in with the rest. And that was that. She was prosecuted. Found guilty. Lost her job. And the stain of it all stuck to her like tar. A young graduate with a record like that? Her future was shattered. Funny thing, the cops never asked about the gun. Never checked the registry. It was legally mine, licensed back in Bedford. But they didn't even look into it. I wasn't a suspect. Why would they be looking for me? And none of those pub rats turned me in. I still don't know why. Carrie kept trying to get in touch. Called over and over. I never saw her again in person, but eventually I picked up. She told me she still loved me. Said all the things you'd expect, how she was sorry, how she changed, how it was all a mistake. I think part of her really did love me. And yeah, I think it broke her heart when I wouldn't even entertain the idea of getting back together. But I shut it down. Wouldn't talk about it. Wouldn't let her explain. And after what I did, well, I think she was a little scared of me, too. Rightfully so. I asked Carrie point blank about her past with Carl and what really happened during those student days working at the pub. To her credit, she didn't try to dance around it. I pushed for the full truth, how she went from pulling pints to the mess I walked into that night. That's when she told me. She never actually worked behind the bar. The truth hit like a punch to the gut. She wasn't a bartender back then. She'd been one of Carl's girls. One of them. It all suddenly made sense. The way Carl looked at her, the way he spoke to her, the control he had over her even after all these years. I'd married an ex-prostitute. And I hadn't even known it. It took going back to that pub, that night, for the truth to finally come out. Whether that revelation is good or bad, well, I'll let others make that call. She did warn me that Carl would come looking for me. Said he'd want to settle things, once he recovered. Maybe that's why no one at the pub ratted me out to the police. People like Carl handle things their own way. But he'd never find me. I pulled out of the Leeds job, not that anyone blamed me, considering the scandals surrounding Carrie. My company understood and offered me the post in the Middle East instead. They preferred single men anyway, cheaper than relocating a married couple. And that's pretty much where we came in. Somehow, I got away with it. No charges, no knock on the door, nothing. They chalked it up to a gang-related shooting. You're probably wondering what happened to me after all that. Well, fair question. I gave up clay pigeon shooting. Sold the shotgun. Took up golf instead. Got pretty good at it, too, handicapped down to a 6. Dated a few women. And that's when I realized just how damn good my wife Carrie had been in bed. I mean, makes sense, right? She'd had training, in both senses of the word. Then I met Angie. An American woman I got to know in Dubai. Kind, smart, and beautiful. Life was good after that. Really good. I never asked too many questions about where Angie picked up her skills. She always struck me as a natural. A gifted amateur, let's say. I hope that was the case. We never got married, her choice. And technically, I was still married anyway. I never bothered to get a divorce. I went back to the UK from time to time but always avoided Leeds. Until one random Thursday in June. I found myself driving slowly past the Rose and Crown, wondering if anyone would recognize me after all these years. The old stained glass windows were gone, replaced with sterile double-glazed panels. Shame, really. I'd always liked those windows. I sat in the car for a bit. Then I saw him. A guy in a wheelchair rolled up. Big, rough-looking guy. He'd put on weight, but something about him rang familiar. Then the guy pushing him came into view, bad limp, built like a truck. That limp? That was Ted. No doubt about it. Then came the women. They poured out of the pub like before. Same look, rough, hard-faced, worn. Except one. One woman looked different. Pretty, slender. Long legs. It could have been her. Carrie. She looked older, way older. The short hair was still there, the smart clothes too, but her eyes were empty. The sparkle, the warmth, they were gone. And the smile I used to love so much? Nowhere to be found. She didn't look happy. But I didn't stick around to confirm it. After all, she'd said it herself, she wasn't 14 anymore. She could look after herself. Funny how things turn out. If that stupid restaurant hadn't been remodeled, if the decor had been just like she remembered, maybe she wouldn't have dragged me down that alley, back to that pub. Maybe she'd be home right now, with me. With our kids. The ones we'll never have. And I'd never have known. Maybe we would have lived happily ever after.